Good day, everybody. I hope that you are well, and I also hope that you are having a good day so far. Today, we'll be doing our grade 5 English lesson on idioms and adages. And before we start, we're going to log on to aplusstudents.ca. Once you've logged on to aplusstudents.ca with our username as well as our password, all right, so now we have grade 5. We're doing idioms and adages, and we are basically we're doing we on aplusstudents.ca doing grade 5, and then we're going to scroll down up until we get to our chapter of idioms and adages. All right, so our chapter is idioms and adages. Our subject is English language arts. We're doing grade 5, and then the lessons that we are going to be focusing on under the chapter of idioms and adages, it is to determine the meaning of idioms from context, and we're going to identify the meaning of idioms and adages. All right. So when it comes to idioms and adages, right? An idiom is a phrase that means that means something different than what the words in the phrase mean on its own. So once again, we said an idiom, it is a phrase that means something different than what the word in the phrase mean on its own. Something different. Which means that if you look at idioms, right, or phrases, then you cannot give the direct translation of that phrase because it's not the direct meaning of what the phrase actually means. And we're going to look at a few examples of how um, we can try and determine the meanings of idioms from context. All right, and if we look at an example, if we look at an example, the example says under the weather. If we were to give the direct translation of under the weather, then it kind of sound as if we are saying we are sitting outside under the sun, under the rain, under the clouds, right? That would kind of mean under the weather, right? But if we look at that word again, or like at the phrase again, because it's an idiom, it's a phrase, right? Then under the weather does not directly mean anything to do with the weather. It's got nothing to do with the weather. So under the weather's got nothing to do with the weather. The meaning of under the weather is it's where you don't feel well. So under the weather, it means that someone isn't feeling well. If you're feeling feverish, if you have a cold, or you think that you're not, you're getting sick or something, and then you can say that, I'm feeling a bit under the weather, I'm not going to school, or I cannot go and play soccer, or whatever, you know reason you'll come up with, because you are not feeling well, you are basically ill. So basically, when it comes to idioms, you cannot give the direct translation of that word. So you cannot just look at a specific word or look at a specific phrase and try and figure out the meaning of that. You're going to either have to maybe know the idiom and know that, okay, under the weather actually means that you're not feeling well. You're either going to have to know it like that, or you're going to have to look at the context or the sentence in which that phrase is written in, and then you can maybe see how it is written in, and then try and figure out what the meaning of, or basically what that idiom or that phrase actually means. And if we look at an example, right, remember we said that if you want to maybe try and remember the idiom, you can look at the context or the sentence in which the phrase is written in. Look at this example. It says, Sally stayed home because she's feeling under the weather. So now, if you maybe look at that context in which that idiom is written, now you can maybe realize, like, oh, okay, so this is one of the reasons maybe why Sally stayed home, because I think Sally's not feeling well. She's under the weather. All right. So once again, the meanings of idioms cannot be found by just looking at the meanings of each word. Meaning that we cannot say under means you're standing under something, weather, nothing to do with the weather outside, right? You are going to have to either try and figure out what the meaning is, because it's not the direct meaning of the words or the phrase. It means something different than what the words or the phrase mean on their own. So you're either going to have to remember the idiom or the phrase, Or you're going to have to figure out the meanings by looking at how they are used within a sentence or within the context that it is being used. All right, so now we're going to aplusstudents.ca. We're going to determine the meaning of idioms from context, and we're going to identify the meaning of idioms and adages. All right, so now we're going to determine the meaning of idioms from context. And once again, we said an idiom is a phrase that means something different than what the words in the phrase mean on their own. It is not the direct meaning of what you'll see in the phrase, right? Okay, so now we need to say what is the meaning of go back to the drawing board? What is the meaning of go back to the drawing board? So if we were to say go back to the drawing board, it says when we found out that the new fence failed to keep the rabbits out of our garden, we had to go back to the drawing board and try something else. What do you think go back to the drawing board means? So going back to the drawing board or go back to the drawing board, does it mean to make a firm demand, or does it mean to start over from the beginning? The first one or the second one? When we say we're going back to the drawing board, and if we were to identify the meaning of the phrase go back to the drawing board, then yes, the second option, which is to start over from the beginning, that means go back to the drawing board, meaning that we came up with an idea and the idea didn't work. Let's go back to the beginning. We came up with that idea didn't work. Let's go back to the drawing board, meaning that we're going to start all over with fresh ideas in order to come up a way in order to keep the rabbits out of the garden or something like that. All right. So, okay. So once again, right, we have an idiom. What don't you understand what idioms are, or you don't understand the go back to the drawing board? Which one don't you understand? Okay, don't worry. So we're doing idioms, right? And adages. So idioms and adages, it is phrases that mean something totally different than what the actual phrase mean directly. For example, like we just made an example of go back to the drawing board. So if that phrase is being used, right, it's nothing to do with a drawing board, right? It's nothing to do with a drawing board. You're not going to have a blackboard or anything. It's nothing to do with that. That basically just means that the meaning, the direct meaning, or not the direct meaning, but the meaning of go back to the drawing board, it basically means to start from the beginning. So it's like I made an example when we said that if you're not feeling well, right? So now you're going to use a phrase of instead of saying I don't feel well, you're going to say I'm a bit under the weather. That is a phrase that is being used that actually means that you are not feeling well. So it is basically phrases that you use that mean something different than what the actual meaning of the word is. Or it is basically something different than what the words in the phrase mean on their own. That is idioms, right? So once again, if we say that I am under the weather, then it's nothing to do with the weather, but it's got something to do with the fact that I don't feel well. Because idioms are phrases, and that is why we say when it comes to idioms, it's either you're gonna have to know the meaning of that idiom based on the fact that you're going to study it, or you're gonna have to look at the sentence. Like for example, over here, if we talk about go back to the drawing board, then the sentence would be like, when we find out that the new fence failed to keep the rabbits out of our garden, we had to go back to the drawing board and try something else. So, which means that if we kind of come up with an idea of what we think go back to the drawing board means, then it means that they need to come up with new and fresh ideas, go back to the beginning where they came up with an idea as to how to keep the rabbits out of the garden, right? So, then idiom, which is the chapter of our lesson, it is a phrase that means something different than what the words in the phrase mean. So I don't know what kind of phrases or what other phrases have you learned already to, I don't know, to kind of make it a bit easier for you to understand. I'm going to come up with a few phrases and then you can maybe come up with an idea of if you've heard it or not. Like let's say for example, if let's say somebody says that they want to tell you something. I'm not sure if you heard already, then somebody would say, I'm all ears. Have you heard that already? Have you heard anybody say, I'm all ears? So when somebody says, I'm all ears, it is nothing to do with the fact that you have a lot of ears, right? It just means that I am listening. Because if somebody wants to tell you something and you say, I'm all ears, then it means that you're telling that person, like, okay, cool, go ahead, I'm listening. What do we listen with? Our ears. But you see, it has got nothing directly to do with the ears. It is just it's to do with the fact that you are going to listen to that person when you say I'm all ears. Or let's say, for example, you and your friend maybe talk about someone, right? So maybe you were asking, hey, I didn't see Nadine in a while, blah, blah, blah. I wonder how she's doing. Or, and now all of a sudden I just come into the room. And now you're like, oh, speak of the devil. Have you heard that saying already? Speak of the devil. It's nothing to do with the devil in hell, right? It just means that we literally just spoke about you, and now all of a sudden you are, entering the room, or the person calls, or something of the sort, right? That is what it means when we say speak of the devil, for example. So I'm not sure if you already heard that phrase, speak of the devil. I'm not trying to come up with idioms or phrases that are more common that people have used already, just for you to kind of get the idea of what idioms are. Or let's look at the last example before we continue. I don't know if you heard already, when somebody would say, yo, I am flat broke. I'm flat broke. If somebody, for example, says, I am flat broke, then it means that you don't have any money. Or another idiom would be on the same page. If somebody were to say, like, oh no, we're on the same page. Like, let's say, for example, like I'm explaining now to you, trying to come up with more examples of what an idiom is. And let's say now you respond and you tell me like, oh no, no, ma'am, don't worry, we're on the same page. Then it means that we are now in some form of an agreement, the two of us, because you do understand now what I'm trying to say. So now we're on the same page. Nothing to do with an actual page. It's just that we are in agreement. I understand and I agree with you, right? So that is basically just a few examples of idioms. It's a phrase or phrases that mean something different than what the words in the phrase mean on their own, right? So before we continue with idioms, does everybody understand what an idiom is? So does everybody understand what an idiom is before I continue? All right. All right. So now we're going to continue. I'm glad we are on the same page. So I'm glad we're on the same page. So now we're going to continue. All right. We're going to look at another example and then we are going to our test. It says, what is the meaning of it costs an arm and a leg? Let's say you're going to the shop, all right, and you want the latest PSP, right? And now your parent is telling you, yeah, this costs an arm and a leg. What does it actually mean? Or if we look at the example of the sentence that this phrase actually basically is in, it says, I would love to go on that tropical vacation, but it costs an arm and a leg. Or I would like that latest cell phone or latest PSP, but it costs an arm and a leg. What does it mean when we say costs an arm and a leg? What does it mean? Does it mean to be very expensive? Or does it mean to ask for favors to make something happen? What does it mean? It costs an arm and a leg. All right. And yes, if we were to identify or if we were to find the meaning of costing what cost an arm and a leg, then cost an arm and a leg, it means to be very expensive. Yes, well done. It is too expensive or to be very expensive. Well done. That is what it means when it says it costs an arm and a leg. So next time if you go to the shop and something is too expensive, even because your pocket money cannot buy that, you can also say like, this thing it costs an arm and a leg. Right? Instead of saying this is very expensive, you can say it costs an arm and a leg. So you can use the idiom instead of the direct translation. All right, well done. So now we're going to our test where we're going to determine the meaning of idioms from context, meaning from the sentence. It says, what is the meaning of at the drop of a hat? What is the meaning of at the drop of a hat? It says, don't mention Hawaii because Shauna will show her photographs of Waikiki Beach at the drop of a hat. Is that mean falling to the ground, meaning the hat is dropping? Or option two, with little persuading? So option one, falling to the ground, or option two, with little persuading? All right, then if we were to choose the correct answer of the idiom or the meaning of that idiom at the drop of a hat, then yes, with little persuading. Well done. The next one says, what is the meaning of to draw the line? It's like, this is where I draw the line. The sentence says, I'll agree to go to the play, but I draw the line at going to the party afterwards. So draw the line. Is it option one to set a limit at one? To set a limit one would go beyond? Or is it option two to make a mark with a ruler? Draw the line. All right, and if we were to select the meaning of the idiom draw the line, then yes, it means that to set a limit you won't go beyond. Well done. Option one is correct. The next one says, what is the meaning of have a big mouth? Have a big mouth. Is it to do with a big mouth actually? Or how big or how small your mouth is? Have a big mouth. It means my cousin Ryan has a big mouth. So he told everyone I like Owen. My cousin Ryan has a big mouth, so he told everyone that I like Owen. Big mouth. Is it to accept an offer for a later time or to tend to give away secrets? Option one or option two? So to have a big mouth, yes, if we were to say have a big mouth, then it means that that person tend to give away our secrets. You tell someone something and that person has a big mouth and goes and spews all of the secrets that was told to him or her. That is when somebody has a big mouth. So well done. So now we're going to identify the meanings of idioms and adages, right? And when we determine the meaning or identify the meaning of idioms and adages, this is basically the same as us just coming up with the idea of what the meaning of the idiom or the phrase is. It's just that it's without the sentence, it's not in a sentence. It's the phrase that is given to you, and we just need to identify the idiom or the adages of that specific phrase. For example, what is the meaning of at the drop of a hat? We just now did this. What is the meaning of at the drop of a hat? Does it mean with little persuading, or does it mean not paying attention? All right, so yes, the first one with little persuading is correct because that is the meaning of at the drop of a hat. The next one says, what is the meaning of a picture is worth 1,000 words? A picture is worth 1,000 words. What do you think that means? Does it mean that images can often say more than language can? Images can basically say more than what language can, or do we say it is easy to forget someone who is not around? A picture is worth 1,000 words. So a picture is worth 1,000 words. Does it mean option one, images, which is pictures, can often say more than language can? Or option two, it is easy to forget someone who is not around. And if we were to say what the meaning of a picture is worth 1,000 words is, then yes, we can say images can often say more than language. It's like if somebody looks at your pictures, right? They don't even have to ask you anything. They just look at your picture and you're like, wow. So you were here, there, the other, blah, 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 the vlogs and the things that people be making or blogs. Then they see, like, it's almost like it's already talking to them without them even having to ask you anything. All right, so now we're going to our test where we are going to identify the meaning of idioms and adages. It says, what is the meaning of put a cork in it? Put a cork in it. Does it mean option one, to accept unpleasant results in one's action? Or is it option two, to stop talking right now? All right, so is it option one? Okay, and if we were to choose the correct option, then to stop talking. Think of a cork that you put in something in order to stop either the water or something, or even a plug from, putting a cork is like putting a plug in something so it stops the water from going, or it stops something from falling out. So that is almost like saying putting a cork in to stop talking. Yes, well done. Option two is correct. What is the meaning of watched pot never boils? A watched pot never boils. Is it option one, acting too quickly causes mistakes? Or option two, time feels longer when you are waiting for something. So a watched pot never boils. All right. And when we say watch a watch pot never boils, is it option one, acting too quickly causes mistakes, or option two, time feels longer when you're waiting for something? What does watch pot never boils mean? Option one or option two? All right. And yes, if we were to choose the correct answer or option, then option two is correct. Just think of, let's say for example, you say you're at school and now you're ready to go home and you're watching the time, or you're looking at the clock all the time, and it's been, they say it's 30 minutes, it's 20 minutes, and whenever you look at the watch it just feels like the time is going very slow. That is also when they say almost like a watch pot never boils, because you are watching it all the time. Now the time is actually going way longer, or something feels way longer, because you are waiting, you are watching, you are looking at something, right? Yes, you're waiting for something. Well done. All right, and the last one says, what is the meaning of split hairs? Split hairs, is it to fight over tiny differences or to brush one's hair too hard? Split hairs, to fight over tiny differences or to brush one's hair too hard. All right, and if we were to see what the meaning of split hairs are, then it is to fight over tiny differences. All right, that is now the end of our lesson on idioms and adages. We said idioms and adages are words that, or let's say it's phrases that means something different than what the actual phrase or the actual meaning of the phrase is, right? So, in order for you to know the meaning of the phrase, you're either going to have to know it by heart, like when you study it, or you're going to have to look at the context in which or in what the sentence or the phrase is written in. All right, so this is now the end of our lesson. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining, and I really hope you're going to have a good evening further. So, till next time, goodbye.